What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're doing the review of the Reebok Nano 10s. Alright, so just to clear up a little bit of confusion before we get going on this review, the Nano X is the Nano 10. Some people had been asking me whether or not there's going to be an actual Nano 10 this year, and to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe so. The Nano X is the Nano 10, obviously, because X is the Roman numeral for 10. And then next year, the Nano 11 is going to be the Nano 11. It's not going to be the Nano XI or anything. But anyways, the Nano 10s are built on the same platform as the Nano 9s. So you'll see a little bit of similarities between the two shoes. But for the most part, the Nano 10s are a pretty radical departure from what we're usually used to seeing with Nano shoes because of mainly the styling. The styling of the shoe is a little bit out there compared to the normal minimalist design of Nanos, especially what we're coming from in the 9s, which have a more just basic look to them. There's not a whole lot going on with the 9s. Of course, they reintroduced the vector with the 9s, and we do have that with the 10s. It's kind of formed in a few different ways. There's some overlays on the side of the upper, and then the strike through part is formed from the silhouette of the quarter panel. But anyways, let's talk about the actual just construction of the 10s in general. The vamp of the shoe is a new style of flex weave. It's a little bit more stretchy. It is a little bit more comfortable than on the 9s. It has an X pattern to it. There's still a booty with the Nano 10s. You can feel it when you reach inside of the shoe. It keeps the flex weave from touching your foot. It kind of has this sock-like feel to it. And then on top of the flex weave in the vamp, there are some overlays for some targeted support. So you have the vector lines, and then you have some on the metatarsal areas of the shoe. And it does a really good job in just keeping your foot in place just from those overlays, but there is a little bit more to the construction that helps secure your foot a little bit better than it did in the 9s. When you go around to the rear panel of the shoe, you have more of a textile type material. There's no more flex weave in this area. There is some kind of mesh nylon that is presumably for ventilation, because that mesh does not stretch like the flex weave does. This area back here is a lot more rigid than the toe box of the shoe, and the structure in the whole ankle area of the shoe is just a lot better than it was with the Nano 9s. It feels a lot more secure in this area. And then at the back part of the shoe, there's a PU leather that has the Reebok logo at the back there. There's no more CrossFit branding at all on this shoe. Except if you want to consider the Delta CrossFit branding, there is a logo in the insole, which is removable, and then there's a Delta on the toe right at the very point. But otherwise, that's pretty much it when it comes to the Nano 10s. Back to the back part of the shoe, the PU leather part right here is basically your heel counter for the Nano 10s, and that connects into the TPU carrier that this year feels a little bit more pliable, a little bit more soft than the last year's model, and that houses the compression molded EVA foam midsole that runs pretty much throughout the whole shoe. On this shoe, it's got some speckles on the outside or the lateral side, and then on the medial side there are no speckles, which is kind of weird, but whatever. And then when we get to the bottom of the shoe, we have pretty much the same exact thing as the 9s. As far as tread pattern goes, the outsole rubber feels the same to me, which I honestly don't have any issues with because I thought the rubber on the 9s was great. The Rope Pro is still there. It's in the medial part of the shoe. And with the 9s, some people had some issues with that peeling, with some rope climbs, but personally I never ran into those issues. So durability in that area is yet to be seen. I actually haven't done a rope climb in this shoe, but with the 9s, I thought rope climbs were excellent. I thought the Rope Pro did a really good job in grabbing the rope. That hasn't changed, so I don't expect rope climbability to change with the 10s. Of course, you have the Metasplit grooves at the forefoot, and then you have the decoupled heel, which is supposed to make running a little bit better in the Nano 9 and the Nano 10. So going back to the ankle collar of the shoe, that is the elephant in the room. Everybody is talking about whether or not this is a mid-cut. It kind of has that appearance because of the heightened tongue and then the turned out Achilles. So the purpose of the turned out Achilles is to keep that area comfortable when it's rubbing against your Achilles tendon. Personally, I've never had any issues with any of the previous Nanos rubbing up against my Achilles tendon, but that's supposed to safeguard the people that have run into those issues. In my use of this shoe, that part just makes it so that there's like no heel slip in the shoe. The fit at the heel part of the Nano 10s is excellent. They use a new high density foam. There's quite a bit more cushioning in this area than there was on the 9s, which had more of like a plain and basic booty. And then when you get up to the tongue, it's way more padded than on the 9s. It also rises up a little bit higher, and then it has some folds in it, which basically fold around the front part of your ankle and kind of give it a sock-like fit. It's actually really comfortable. That's one of my favorite parts of the shoe. The drop on the shoe is unknown. I don't have any official word on it, but I think it's safe to say that it's probably 4 millimeters. The 9s were 4 millimeters. Every Nano before was 4 millimeters, so I don't know why they would change it for the Nano 10s. It feels pretty similar to me, with the exception of the new EVA foam rim that pretty much runs around the outside of the shoe. You can't see it, but you can feel it when you put your foot into it. Basically cups your foot in place. It feels like there's a little bit more midsole cushioning on this shoe, but I think that's just from that foam rim. That also makes the shoe feel and fit a little bit more narrow. Now, since there's all of these new materials and overlays in the Nano 10, they weigh quite a bit more than the 9s did. I weighed these in at a pretty whopping 14 ounces for a men's size 10. And that's 1 full ounce compared to the Nano 9s. It's a pretty heavy training shoe, and you can definitely feel it. So when you go to size your Nano 10s, I'm going to recommend that you go with your normal training shoe size. Initially, when I put these shoes on, I thought that they were on the small side, but after a little bit of wear, they broke in and became a little bit more comfortable. I will say, though, that they will never be as wide as the Nano 9s. Even with as much break-in in the world, these are just a more narrow shoe that fit a little bit closer to skin than your 9s did. If you were one of those people that had to size your 9s down, I'm going to recommend that you go with your normal Nano size for the 10s. Everything about the Nano 10s just fits a little bit more on the snug side. The toe box is a little bit more narrow. The fit around the ankle is a little bit tighter. The midfoot, surprisingly, does not have that break-in time for the TPU carrier. On this shoe, it seems a little bit more flexible. So in my use, I never felt that that part of the shoe was uncomfortable or needed any kind of break-in. The only part of the shoe that needed a break-in was the toe box of the 10s. So in the history of Nanos, we usually see that the odd-numbered shoes are a little bit more on the stiff and rigid side, whereas the even-numbered shoes are a little bit more on the flexible and comfortable side. And that's pretty much the reason why everybody thinks that the even-numbered shoes are the better Nanos. In the case of the 10s, that is true to some extent. I think some parts of the shoe are more flexible, and then there's other parts of it that are a little bit more rigid. The flex weave upper on the shoe is for sure better. It's more flexible, it's more breathable, it bends and moves with your foot very well. It feels like a sock against your skin. There's no hot spots on top of the shoe. It's just a better upper, but there are certain parts like the quarter panel of the shoe is a little bit more stiff. It's a little bit more rigid in this area. There's a little bit more security. So it does feel a little bit stiffer in the back or heel part of the shoe. But then the TPU carrier on the shoe does flex and bend a little bit more than it did on the 9s. Overall, since there's a little bit more bulk to the shoe in general, it does feel like it's a little bit more on the stiff side. Even with that, I still do think that the 10s are a better running shoe for me personally. They fit my foot a lot better. They feel a lot less sloppy than the 9s did to run in. And I know there's a lot of people that really liked running in 9s. I just wasn't one of them. This shoe feels a lot better to me, though there are some downsides to that as well. It's still not the greatest running shoe. It's really heavy. I mean, 14 ounces is for sure a heavy running shoe. If you were going for distance, this would not be the shoe to take. I never ran into any issues doing double unders. I thought the toe box in the shoe was very flexible and comfortable. I did notice that my toes ran into the front of the shoe just because they're a little bit on the smaller side. Things like burpees were not so good in these shoes. I did feel the weight of them quite a bit. It just kind of felt like I was dragging my feet, stepping up, doing burpees, or jumping up, doing burpees. Doing things like box jumps is stable and comfortable enough, though, like I said, it's still a pretty heavy shoe. It does feel like you're moving something big around on your foot, and you will notice that quite a bit when you're doing any kind of plyometric movements in the Nano 10s. With all of that heft does come some positives, namely in the stability department, because I think that the Nano 10s are the best nanos to lift in to date, and they improve upon the already stellar Nano 9s. The fit of the shoe is just much better. It's a more form-fitting upper. The new flex weave upper holds your foot in place, but it doesn't do it in an uncomfortable fashion. Like I said, the toe box is a little bit more narrow, so my feet in this shoe don't go sliding around quite as much as they did in the Nano 9s, but it's still very comfortable. It doesn't feel like my feet or my toes are being constricted. And then around the heel or ankle part of the shoe, the fit is excellent. The new added materials make this part of the shoe feel extremely stable, like your heel is completely locked into place. When you're doing any kind of Olympic weightlifting movement, landings feel extremely secure in this shoe, and the wide contact area makes it so that you get planted to the ground the moment that you land. Another reason why the Nano 10s are a better shoe to lift in is because of that EVA foam rim that goes all around the shoe. It basically acts like a cup to hold your foot in place while you're doing any of your lifts. You're going to notice that a lot, mainly when you do your Olympic weightlifting movements, but you're also going to notice it when you do your just slow lifts, your deadlifts, your squats. You're going to feel extremely planted and stable, stuck to the ground when you're lifting in your Nano 10s because of that. And it does feel like there is a little bit more midsole cushioning, but it doesn't detract from the overall power delivery and responsiveness from the Nano 10s. So when it comes to comparing the Nano 9s to the Nano 10s, I personally prefer the Nano 10s. I think they're a better shoe overall. I think that they are the better lifting shoe. And for me personally, they are the better running shoe despite the extra weight and extra heft of these shoes. If you were one of those people that liked the Nano 9s because they fit pretty generously, like definitely on the wide side, then you might not like the Nano 10s because they are for sure more form-fitting and a little bit more narrow. Stability is also very good with the Nano 9s, but it's just not as good for me personally as it is on the 10s. The 9s are for sure lighter. They feel like more of a minimalistic shoe. Even though they're not very minimalistic, they do definitely feel like so in comparison to the 10s. If I'm comparing the Metcon 5s to the Nano 10s, I'm going to say that if you wanted a more flexible, a lighter shoe, go with the Metcon 5s because I think they're a little bit more comfortable. They're personally, for me, a little bit better to run in than the Nano 10s. But if I'm going for like a 1 rep max or if I'm doing a CrossFit competition or something, then I would definitely pick the Nano 10s. I think that they are more of a competition shoe for me. I don't care that they're a little bit heavier. I do care that they are a little bit more stable, and I'm probably not going to be running all that much in the 10s, in which case they're going to be fine for most of the runs that you're going to be doing in CrossFit anyways. But if I'm doing any kind of longer runs, I'm for sure picking the Metcon 5s. The same thing goes with the React Metcons. I think that these are a very comfortable shoe to run in. I think they're a very comfortable shoe to just train in general. But I wouldn't take the React Metcons if it came to like a liftoff, in which case I would take the Nano 10s for sure any day. Though I do think that the React Metcons are still one of my favorite training shoes, and I think that they're very good for day-to-day training. If you wanted to compare Noble trainers to the Nano 10s, I would say the Nobles are much more of a minimalist trainer, and that's the reason why people like these shoes. The midsole is pretty basic. It's very close to the ground, especially in comparison to the Nano 9s and Nano 10s, which have quite a bit of midsole cushioning. Both of them are very responsive shoes. I think that the Nano 10s have a much wider, much better base to lift on. The Nobles are pretty good. I'd probably take these to deadlift in over the Nano 10s, but for like Olympic weightlifting movements and squatting, I'd take the Nano 10s. If it came down to running, it's kind of a wash. The Nobles are minimalist. The Nano 10s are a little bit more padded, a little bit more comfortable, but they are also much more heavy. So in conclusion, I think that the Nano 10s are one of the best, if not the best training shoe on the market right now, but that comes with a huge asterisk because it's very subjective. There's a lot of polarizing things about the Nano 10s. The most glaring one is the way that they look. Some people are just not on board with the styling of the shoe, and I'm not going to try to change your mind or anything. Personally, I really like the way that the Nano 10s look. I like that they went with more of a streetwear look, more of a sneaker look for this shoe. I think it works well, but I know there's a lot of people that aren't on board with it. But I do applaud Reebok for going and trying something different and making their shoe look a lot different than anything else on the market right now. Another big one is the way that the shoe fits. A lot of people use Nano 9s because they like the width of the toe box. The Nano 10s are and will never be as wide as the Nano 9s. These are just a more fitted, more narrow shoe than the 9s were. And I think that's going to be off-putting for a lot of fans of the Nano 9. And that plays into some other facets of the Nano 10s. I don't think that they're as flexible as the 9s because there's a little bit more bulk to the shoe in general. And even though I do think that these are a better shoe to lift in, the Nano 9s are no slouch at all. Those are still some of the best training shoes on the market right now. But even though the Nano 9s are probably the better bang for the buck right now, I don't think that detracts any value from the Nano 10s because these are still, in my opinion, the better shoe. I think they're probably not the best shoe to do long distance runs in, but they should handle the runs that you're doing in a typical training day just fine. If you're looking to do long distance runs, just get a pair of running shoes. What I think the Nano 10s excel at the most in is their lifting performance. These are the most rock solid, stable training shoe that money can buy right now. There are probably better powerlifting shoes, there are probably better Olympic weightlifting shoes, but if you wanted a training shoe to lift in, the Nano 10s are the best to pick. You can read the full-on written review of the Nano 10s on my website, asmanyreviews.com. If you guys have any questions about the Nano 10s, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always, guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.